So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to speak at this year's Public Eye Award. Of course, we economists used to be quite good at focusing on the sunny side up of capitalism and the sunny side up of economics and the sunny side up of globalization. And only now we are slowly realizing that there is a dark side of the moon connected to that as well. That's why I would like to focus on, in my 15 minutes, on the economics of evil. You know, there's first of all, there is the unintended evil. You know, if only all problems of the world related to the economy were a sort of a Bernie Madoff case, which is a clear case where law was broken, and you could actually sentence this man, and if law is restored, then the problem is sorted out. The problem is that this is not the biggest problem. If only all the problems were the cases of excessive gluttony and carelessness, like we see portrayed in many modern Wall Street movies, such as the American Psycho, if you've seen that one, or books like City Boy, etc., where, you know, perverted psychopaths perversely abuse the system. The question is much more complex and much more complicated. Most of the people who cause the biggest problems in our crises and in this world that we live in were actually quite nice and often didn't even mean to do any evil. It is what certain structures resemble what John Paul II once called sinful structures. Each person in such a structure is a nice person with no evil intent whatsoever, yet as a result, evil is created. This is a little bit, again, because I like movies, this reminds me a little bit of the movie The Cube, the horror movie, I don't know if you recall. Basically, 12 people get trapped in a Rubicon-like box, which is of huge magnitude, and they are being tortured and eventually killed in a really brutal way. It's a little bit Kafka-like scenario. They don't know what is it that they've done. They don't know why do they have to suffer for this. And only later in the movie we realize that each one of them has actually contributed to building this cube, which is so vicious and self-torturing. So in a way, this is the problem with specialization, that the left hand does not know what the right hand is doing, or vice versa. Anyway, so evil is created even without evil intent, which is something that that John Paul called. Unfortunately, he only mentioned this once. I think it's a thought that should be further developed. The thought of a sinful structure, where the evil lies in the cracks of specialization, so to speak. Secondly, we can get used to evil like we got used to child labor and to slavery. For many generations, this was something normal, something that went along the liberal idea that, you know, as long as it's free, you can do with it what you will. This is similar to the banality of evil, which is something that Hannah Arendt talks about in her famous book, Eichmann in Jerusalem, where you could actually follow a similar logic with the allegations against the financial world or against the banking world. We often also say, well, we don't know, we were just following the law. And obviously the standards of us human beings, luckily, are higher than that of the law. We must understand that the law is here only to keep the minimum standards, not to meet the highest standards of human spirit. So, of course, the allegedly existing invisible hand of the markets will never lead us out of a situation like the banality of evil, when we all get used to bad results happening to people who are simply following the law. So you need an external force, an external eye, an open public eye must play this role. Adam Smith, as a founder of economics, He believed in sort of the inside observer, somebody who actually forces you from within to be a good person rather than a bad person. If such an internal force collapses, then an external force, or at least an external eye, must be present. The view of a significant other cannot be replaced. And this is why I am happy that an external criticism such as the public eye actually exists. This is why we need to care for business, not against business, but for the sake of business. Second thing that I want to talk about is the culture of markets. It is very often believed that culture itself will help alleviate human spirit. It is also often believed that democracy itself will help alleviate human spirit, and it was also in the like manner believed that business itself will better the conditions of human beings. We have overlooked a very important area. It is not just culture what matters, it is the culture of culture. You know that many cultures, or many, even art, was built on one nation propaganda against another nation, and we have had here in Europe a situation when culture was misused in order to murder and kill people. So if the culture itself is not cultured, then that culture can be evil. Now the same thing goes for democracy. Democracy is something that is a best system that we have, but it is not natural. If you let go of the steering wheel, you will not end up in democracy. It is theoretically democratic for the rest of the society to decide that, for example, redheads are dangerous and that they should be kept jailed, or their limits, their freedoms should be limited. This is something that's actually a democratic decision, but it does not really follow the culture of democracy. And we have seen democracies go wrong very often in democratic procedures. Now the same then holds for markets. Markets and businesses must have a culture as well. Now, if you look actually at the history of, let's take Europe alone, let's not take the whole world, but if you only take Europe as such, the history of Europe, and you look on the amount of democracy that we have, you will very quickly learn that democracy was something that we had in absolute minority. There were a couple of democratic villages, today we would say not even cities, in the ancient Greek, and then nothing for many hundreds and even thousands of years. And now, let's say for the past 200 years, in some countries of Europe, we have democracy, but you must also exclude totalitarian regimes such as communism and Nazism. Those would not be democratic. So you see that if you actually look at the time-space of democratic existence in Europe alone, now forgetting the rest of the world, democracy would be in a huge minority. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that a well-functioning democracy, like well-functioning markets, is not something that's natural. It's not a default system. You simply need to care for it. You need to nurture it. You can't let it go on some invisible autopilot. Because I was expecting more younger people, and this is no insult. I had the courage to quote U2, but now that I think of it, young people don't listen to U2 anymore, so I think it's actually our generation, the medieval people. There's a very nice quote from U2 in their song, maybe the most famous song from U2, called One, which says, "Love leaves you, baby, if you don't care for it." And the same, I think, could be said of democracy, the same could be said of culture, and the same could be said of markets themselves. I can only drive 120 kilometers an hour if I give up the freedom to wiggle my hands like this, if I give up the freedom to close my eyes for more than a fraction of a second. I can only enter a highway if I reasonably believe that everybody else will limit their freedoms likewise. The faster you go, the smaller freedom you have to do this with your car. It is very often believed that rules and regulations go against the freedom of the markets, and this actually is not the case. They go very often hand in hand. Let me give a stupid, ridiculous example, and that is the example of language. Language is nothing else but a set of laws, rules, and regulations. And by breaching these rules, laws, and regulations, I will not be a freer person if I just start blah, 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 breaking everything that I could when it comes to rules and regulations of language. Now, take poetry, for example. Poetry is nothing else but additional set of, in the views of many, ridiculous rules and regulations as to how sentences should be formed. There must be a rhyme, or there should be some sort of a rhythm. Yet, this extra set of rules is something that makes human spirit, or the expression thereof, much more freer. Now, talking about the speed on the highway, speed or growth is something that has become a predominant economic topic ever since the crises begin. Talking about speed, would it be a correct assessment to say that we have co-created a system which is very speedy, but at the same time unstable? It is very volatile and grows at the impressive speed, but then it collapses at a whim. So a lot of people say that the economy is depressed, which I think is a fundamental misdiagnosis. The economy is not depressed. The economy is manic depressed. And let's have a look on the way the American crisis has started, which actually has a huge bearing with what the Public Eye Award is actually about. Please recall that the American system, the American business system, the American banking or American financial institutions did not collapse during a depression. They collapsed during the manic period. In other words, in the United States of America, you could see something that I call a full throttle bankruptcy. In other words, the system was going very quickly. There was actually a very respectable amount of growth for a long period of time in the United States of America. Unemployment was low, efficiency was high, competitiveness was very high, etc., etc. So there was not a cloud in the sky, a little bit perhaps like today from a macroeconomic point of view. And this exactly was the time when the system went into a collapse. It's, I think, humorous, to say the least, that we're trying to remedy the system today by reinstalling same conditions as were present in 2007. Now, this is what I think the danger of our civilization. The danger of our civilization isn't in our weaknesses. I would see a bigger of a danger for us as a society, as a civilization, actually in our strength. And this crisis that we're still sort of seeing is a fine example of that. Companies started misbehaving not because a threat of bankruptcy or threat of poverty or threat of hunger was at stake, but companies misbehave very often in exactly the opposite momentum, and that is when they're big, when they have no immediate threat at hand. This is the moment when they turn manic and become what we call perhaps mischievous. Now that I started with U2, there's also a nice quote, and this is the last U2 quote, which goes, "Baby, slow down. The ending's not as fun as the start." It would be during the manic times that we have a tendency to be more dangerous to ourselves. What we have done as a Western civilization in the past, we have sold stability in order to buy speed. What must be done now on the macroeconomic level as well as on the level of companies is to reverse this, to buy back stability and sell speed, sell profit in this district. The fourth topic that I want to touch about is a paraphrase on a very famous New Testament line, and that is a sentence that I think all the people that are involved in the business of business are actually saying without really realizing this, and that is, "Forgive us, for we do not know what we are doing. I had the honor of being a part of the Davos meeting 2 years ago, and at the end of the meeting, we met together with other people from the World Economic Forum, with the people who were actually protesting against Davos and against the World Economic Forum. And there were many points that were actually justified, but the one that I remember the most was, and I actually paid very close attention to it, every single speech of every economist ended in a way, well, I'm not really sure, but. So the fact really is that we do not know what we are doing. Now, you can look on money in many different ways. Money is a huge mystery, even to the most deep-thinking philosophers of economics. But one way to look on money is that it is sort of energy. Now, once you deal with this energy, be it in a company or be it in a bank, you are actually meddling with a huge amount of energy which you cannot completely control. Now, the next topic that I want to talk about is actually the very controversial topic on the invisible hand of the society, which will also be my last topic. I will actually surprise you. I do believe in invisible hand, but not of the markets, but of the society. For some strange reason, it's quite mysterious, there is a self-regulatory hand of the society which corrects itself. It doesn't work perfectly, but it works. A fine proof that it does is that we are actually still here as a society. As destructive as we can be, we always have a way to correct ourselves. So when a part of the society breaks a leg, for example, economics in 2008, in this case, politics came to its aid. But you see it also working the other way around. In some situation, it is politics that is aided by the economy. In other terms, it's the arts that are criticizing the business or politics, etc., etc., etc. Now, we must de-fetishize economics. I don't know how it happened that the mysterious and wonderful working of this invisible hand was privatized by businesses only, and we are ignoring the fact that actually we need the whole civilization, the whole society to regulate businesses or parts of the society that have a tendency to walk astray. This, I think, is also one other reason why I think it's good that we have an institution like this, which corrects the tendency, which I think each one of us have, even if you are an economist or an artist or a politician or even a microphone producer, we all have a tendency to become, this is a beautiful German word which is called Fachidioten, and we need other people to show us, perhaps even in an idiotic way, but still show us that the world is not just what we've studied. So thank you very much, and I congratulate the companies. I was not, of course, in the committee, but I congratulate the companies that have become the winners. Thank you.